this is more or less where we are today. Yeah? This is what we call the planetary overshoot. If you look at many, if not most, of the indicators from anything from water to population growth, energy demand, so on and so forth, indicators are consistently going on overshoot. And this is pretty much the challenge for us all, but it also means that this is increasingly the operating space for companies. It is also the world in which investors need to make long-term decisions, and the world in which governments need to regulate common well-being. And partly the reason why the trend looks like this is because our main business and economic models are just wired to an old order. Yeah? The incentives are just not there to take care of natural assets, to a natural capital base. But what does this mean for a country like Brazil? Yeah? And some of the most exciting ideas out there, I think, are the ones that look at tropical rainforest as eco-utilities. This is a global canopy program in the UK. I mean, interestingly, the Amazon rainforest pumps into the air some 8 trillion liters of water a year. Yeah? And this is a service that it basically is provided more or less for free. This means that this is regulating pretty much all of the rainfall of Brazil, of South America, and the science shows of places as far as China. Yeah? When you look at this, then you start reflecting, well, actually, 70% of the energy supply sector in Brazil comes from hydropower. Yeah? But the energy sector in Brazil is nowhere near starting to think about how do we conserve that asset base, which is the Amazon rainforest that is basically producing the water that we need as the main input to the energy process. And this gets even more complicated because the Amazon is not just Brazil. The Amazon is 9 countries in a basin. Yeah? So as the awareness starts to kick in with business leaders and investors in Brazil that the long-term sustainability of the energy matrix of hydropower, and this is Itaipu, but let alone projects of Belo Monte and over 70 hydropower dams that are planned over the next couple of years. The interesting thing is that when you start to think about the Amazon as a green machine that is basically creating the water that drives these plants, and you start thinking that in Colombia, for example, or in the Ecuadorian Amazon, a number of different mining companies, energy, oil extraction, and so on, are having a tremendous impact on the ability of the Amazon to generate that water. What does this mean for the bilateral relationships between Brazil and Colombia, or Brazil and Ecuador? And what does it mean for the business leaders in Brazil in terms of demanding a better governance of the space? We in a way, we're nowhere near this kind of scenario yet, but this is a reality. Yeah? And the thinking around natural assets and our natural capital base is a reality, is already out there. The question now is how do business, governments, and investors kind of sort of catch up to this reality? So the main question, I mean, what excites us the most is not just talking about the problem, but also imagining that if there was an economy that worked in complete balance with nature, this could mean a whole new set of opportunities for business, for investors, and so on. What you have is people increasingly like the Forest Footprint Disclosure Project playing into that space, but also playing into the markets and finance because what they're doing is asking institutional investors and shareholders to formally request from companies that they disclose their impact on forests. Yeah? So the way in which the markets incentives and investor incentives are being pulled and played into the role of companies is quite interesting. You also have the issue of business leadership and what are companies doing ahead of the curve in order to prepare businesses to operate in that kind of biosphere economy. And then fourthly, there's the issue of nature-inspired innovation that is very much the biomimicry agenda. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's very much looking at how to learn from nature in terms of creating new products, new services, new business models. So one of the things that we've developed at Volens is quite a simple, almost like a storytelling model, 5-stage model, that tries to track how these new ideas potentially develop and eventually mainstream into the way the economy works. So stage 1 is typically the eureka moment, where some of these things are emerging, some of these ideas coming to play. What follows is the experiments, the prototyping. Then enterprises are set up, the NGOs that are pushing for new certification schemes, new standards, the investor, the investment fund that is trying to invest in new ways that are ecologically sustainable, so on and so forth. How do we move from these particular experiences, and this is also the challenge and the question to the panel, how do we move from the proven model, the interesting initiative, to start creating a new sense of market momentum that can eventually transform the economy? And what we call that stage, from stage 3, the enterprise, the single enterprise, to stage 4, the ecosystem, where innovators, where pioneers create new forms of partnerships with more established players that can potentially take those solutions to scale. When we think about business, one of the things that we see is this early signals that the ecological footprinting of companies will be essential and will be, as some of the speakers will share with you today, increasingly linked to shareholder value. Yeah. The agenda point for companies here is engage with the agenda. Yeah? Engage with some of the pioneers that are working in the space. Create long-term visions of a zero footprint. Yeah? And how this can be achieved with innovation and R&D. Investors can engage with new business cases for creating more, long-term portfolio investments that are connected to natural assets, as we saw before. If institutional investors are basically backing energy firms that are dependent on water, how do we think about conserving the natural assets that are producing that water, and so on and so forth? And in terms of governments, we talked about TEEB, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, trying to quantify the value of these assets, trying to understand where they are, and trying to understand how to preserve them. And much more needs to be done in this space by local, national, and regional forms of government. And this almost as a way to create a blueprint of how to invest in these ecological infrastructures. I gave the example of the Amazon. There are many, many others. And governments obviously have a key role to play.